Nine bells. Good to be with everybody. We're going to have a really fun day today. So this is day 4 of the Thriving in Uncertainty series through the Codex of Change. And we're going to do just a quick run through the first 3 days. Today, though, we're going to really stretch our thinking today. And I'm really excited. These next 2 days, we start to kind of put everything together that we've worked on in the first 3 days. And it's all going to fold into these next 2. So get your, as used to say in school, get your thinking caps on, because today we're going to do a mind stretch for sure. So let's cover the last first 3 days. So in the first session, we talked about finding abundance and curiosity, and having an open mindset versus a closed mindset. So curiosity is what naturally leads us to having an open mindset. If we're curious about what's happening, if we're curious about what our future is going to be, then our mind opens up, our peripheral vision opens up, and then we have endless opportunity. Closed mind, not so much, right? A closed mind, we're kind of singularly focused, maybe a little afraid, and all of a sudden, our opportunities start to narrow very quickly. And maybe the high-end opportunity that we thought all of a sudden drops down, or you got a high-end, what you thought was a high-end opportunity, and then what comes in underneath are really kind of, much lesser options. So we want to have an open mindset. We want to always be curious about what's going on. Remember, we were talking about on Tuesday about being able to go 100 feet at a time driving at night with what our car lights illuminate. It's basically 100 feet at a time. And we're able to go all night long if we want to, and we're perfectly comfortable with that. So that's about the curiosity piece. That's about, we're going 100. Life is like driving at night, being able to see only 100 feet at a time. On day 2, we also talked about your emotional dashboard. So when we get into our car every morning, our car dashboard is not the car. The car dashboard is giving us feedback on how the car is doing. It's exactly what our emotions are designed for. They're designed for that. They're designed to give us feedback on how we're doing. So if we're happy, do more of that. If we're afraid, why? If we're annoyed, why? Right? All the whys, okay, are about figuring out through the emotional feedback, why is this happening this way? Why am I feeling this way? Remember, we talked about metacognition, the process of thinking about what you're thinking about. And that's what your emotions are. Your emotions are dashboards. They're not triggers. Now, we all get triggered, so it's going to happen. So don't beat yourself up about it, okay? It's just a learning process. But our emotions are about really giving us feedback about what's going on around us, how we're interacting, we're interacting with either people or circumstances or places, and then how do I digest that, right? How do I distill that down to a point where I can understand what this emotion is, right? So your emotions are part of your dashboard, your personal dashboard. Then yesterday we talked about perspectives and how important perspectives are, and that events, change, all of that is, the outcome of that is based on really what perspective we have around it. So well, why is this happening to me thing, right? When people say that, right? We hear it all the time. We've all said it, okay? Is really, it's about when you say that, you're surrendering. You're surrendering because you become a victim. And change is about deciding when I'm having a change process or I'm going through a change event, am I going to be a victim or am I going to be a beneficiary? Because if I'm going to be a beneficiary, then what I'm going to be asking is, okay, what do I got to learn? What am I going to learn from this event? And then along the way, I'm going to find the very best outcome I can for me. It doesn't have to be bad, okay? And moving out of the status quo, we talked about loss aversion yesterday, that people are naturally more anchored in loss aversion. In other words, the status quo is safer. Now, tomorrow, we're going to talk about one of the Hermetic principles from Hermes, the Greek philosopher. Now, one of the Hermetic principles is that everything is always in a state of vibration. which means everything is always in a state of change. So it's not going to be that, well, why is this happening to me? Well, things are going to happen. So you have to decide, really, am I going to be a victim or am I going to be a beneficiary of change? Because things are always changing. It's the only thing that's a constant, right? So everything's about perspective and understanding that as things are occurring around us, they're all really learning opportunities if we choose to look at them that way. Okay, so now we're going to do another cleansing breath because we're really going to work our minds hard in the next 20 minutes, okay? So let's close our eyes, breathe in through our nose, and just let out through our mouths. Okay. So the ability to observe without evaluating is the highest form of intelligence. I'll put it another way. The ability to observe without judgment is the highest form of intelligence. So we're going to talk about observation and really the power of observation. And I want to frame it in a way, metaphorically, that I think we can all identify with. So in our lives, we are the writer, the actor, and the director. We write our own script, we star in the show, and then we also direct the show. And so being in observation is the process of understanding that not only am I here today, but I'm also an actor, I'm also the director, and I also write the script. It also means I can change the script down the way. So if I don't like the way this script is going, if I don't like my life script, I can change it. All right. So in an actor-director relationship, the director is passing information back to the actor about his or her performance. We need a little more of this, a little less of that, a little more emphasis here, those types of things. And in our day-to-day world, there's really two of us operating at the same time. I'll repeat that. There's really two of us operating at the same time. So we are both the actor and we are both the director. So the actor of us is going through the day-to-day what we do. I drove my car from Keene to Bedford today, et cetera, et cetera. I'm on this video. The director, though, is the one in observation. And it's two of us at the same time. That's where we're going to stretch our imagination. We're going to think kind of three-dimensionally, okay? There's two of us always functioning, if we choose, at the same time. We've got the actor and we've got the director. Now, think about the director for a second. So the director is in the articulating chair, right? The director's articulating chair above the set. And he or she is looking at the set and making sure that everything's right, making sure things are positioned correctly, make sure all the nuances, right, of production are in place and are operating. And you are the actor. And so the director is feeding the actor feedback. So as we go through our day-to-day, right, the way to be in observation is to understand that there's two of us functioning. There's the actor and there's the director. The actor is actually engaged in the day-to-day, what's going on, moment by moment, situation by situation. But the director, the observer, the director is the observer, okay? If we allow it, feeds information back down to the actor about making course changes. And so we've got this in observation perspective. So there's two of us functioning. I got one of me in observation and I got one of me in action. And we're feeding information live time. Now, here's what's kind of cool about that, is that our scripts in our lives are basically written. So they're written based on our past knowns, right? We talked about this in, I think, maybe day one, that we're not really afraid of change because of the unknown future. We're afraid of change because of the known past. And the known past is the script. So being an observation allows us at any time, okay, to change the script. So if we know that based on our emotional dashboard, if we know that we're feeling, hey, I've been in this situation before, this person, place, or thing, whatever it is triggering me, then I can get that feedback from the observer, and I can actually give that feedback from the observer, the director, right, back down to the actor. Hey, don't do it. Don't do that. Don't let that trigger you, or don't go do that thing. Let's try something different. And the trying something different based on the information you're getting from the director, okay, the observer you, right, is now changing the script. Because our scripts, how we operate, how we function, okay, are all based on our past experiences. It's the unknown, it's not the unknown future, it's the known past. And the known past is what writes the script. And so if you look at it another way, as a lower you and a higher you. So now we don't mean lower and higher in terms of quality or you know, one's better than the other. It's just it's an elevation perspective. It's altitude. So the lower you, okay, is doing your day-to-day stuff. The higher you is following you around in observation. And while it's doing that, it's actually giving you feedback. And that kind of goes back to the dashboard, okay? You're taking in information based on your emotions, and your observer is feeding it back to you, right? While you're at the higher level you and the lower level you are communicating back and forth, if you allow it. And that's kind of gets back to the whole metacognition thing, understanding that just because something triggers you, or just because, you know, the unknown, right? The unknown future might be a little scary. You have the ability to modulate that through thinking about what you're thinking through metacognition. That rolls up into that higher you, or if you look at it at the director level, right, the observer. And so observer, director, and higher you are the same up here. It's the process of observation, and you can look at it any number of ways. And you're giving yourself feedback about the situation that you're in, and that's how you adjust to a different script. So if you think about it in terms like this, there's always two of us operating. We're the same person, but we got two vantage points. We're operating at two different levels. You got the actor, the director. Lower you, higher you. Information can flow. Information flow back and forth. How are we doing on course correction? So let's talk about the script and things that affect it. Because we're all programmed in a certain way, like I said earlier, based on our known pasts. And we all have it. And, you know, some are big and some aren't. Some matter, some kind of don't. But it's understanding, though, that every one of our major actions or things that we're adverse to or in favor of are all based really on past experiences. And that really is a script. We're scripted to behave a certain way. And the only way to basically move that script around or bring it to a different level is by actually understanding that's the case. I'm doing this because I've always done it this way. Or I'm doing this because I did it another way once and I got burned and I'm not doing that again. Well, who says you're going to get burned again? The likelihood of that happening is probably pretty low. It's like being hit by lightning twice, right? And that's what it's all about. It's all about understanding that there's a certain script that I've got that's been written based on my past experiences, and that if I want to change that, I have to understand my emotional feedback, take my emotional feedback, become an observer, observe the situation, and then give myself feedback so that I can make adjustments. Now, when we talk about being an observer, being in a neutral position in an event, it doesn't mean that we're aloof. It doesn't mean that we're not connected. It doesn't mean that we're dispassionate. It doesn't mean that we're not engaged. What it means is that we're trying to understand the circumstances that are around us, okay, metacognition, as opposed to just reacting to the circumstances around us. And then more often than not, you'll see people, they'll just react. So that's just the actor running around without the script, okay? And losing the opportunity to be able to rewrite the script in a way that's healthy and more sustainable. Everything's about, what we want to be looking at is what's healthy and sustainable, or healthy and regenerative, right? Now, how can we do things that are constantly going to regenerate ourselves? And by moving and adjusting our script on a continual basis, they don't have to be big things, they can be little things, but moving our script on a continual basis, rewriting it, allows us then to basically kind of control the future a little bit, right? Like, we know we're not going to get triggered here because I understood why I got triggered. So if it happens again, I don't have to worry about it. I fully understand it. So understand our behavior really much as a script. And you can go back as the observer and the actor, and you can go back and you can make adjustments so the script doesn't repeat itself. So now let's talk about the 10 benefits of being an observation. So being an observation gets us outside of our emotions. So it gives us the ability to be outside and not become a hostage to our emotions. Number two, being an observer doesn't mean that we're aloof or we're ignoring our emotions. And we, as I was just talking about, this isn't about ignoring emotions and stuffing them down. That's really super unhealthy, right? It's like a bad diet. You don't want to be stuffing in your emotions. You want to feel them, you just don't want to become them, right? And in many ways, it helps you become more compassionate because you have a greater understanding of the circumstance and how you can best participate in the circumstance. It's a little bit like the difference between empathy and sympathy, but on steroids. If I can understand the circumstances better, then my compassion isn't about being sympathetic for somebody. My compassion is about actually being able to truly help them, because that's really what you want to do. Three, being an observation helps you distill your emotions. So again, going back to kind of metacognition, that being an observation gives you the breathing room to distill your emotions so that you're not just reacting in the moment, because you kind of catch yourself, right? You kind of catch yourself from saying something that maybe you wish maybe you didn't, or doing something or not doing something. I froze, right? All those types of things. So it gives you a little bit of room to be able to understand more of your emotions, and then make sure that you're making the proper adjustments along the way. Four, once you become the emotion, again, observation, talking about number three, observation allows you to basically distill your emotions. But once you become an emotion, then you leave behind your independent ability to read the situation. And that's like super important, because how many times we've been in certain circumstances, and somebody said something, or something's happened, and you immediately jump to a conclusion. Being the observer allows you to move outside of that, and you then maintain your independent ability to be able to read the situation. Five, so this is really super important. You cannot be in observation and judgment at the same time. In other words, you can't be neutral and be for something at the same time. You're either one or the other. So being an observation really gives you that really independent knowledge, that independent position to be able to look at something without being in judgment. Because when we go to judgment, what happens is now all of a sudden we're labeling things, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Observation gives you the neutral stance so that you can pivot in the right direction. If you're in judgment, okay, you're going to go in whatever direction the judgment has you going in, okay? If you leave yourself in observation, you're neutral, and it gives you the opportunity to pivot when you need to, into whatever the right direction is. Seven, being in observation also allows you the opportunity to basically float in the sea of potential. What opportunities are out there? I'm observing, and we have our peripheral vision turned on, and I'm in my director's articulated chair looking over the scene, the movie scene, which is life. Now all of a sudden I can see all the opportunities. I can see where they are because they're kind of limitless if you allow them to be that way. And by being an observation, that leaves you in the very best position so that you can find the right opportunity or opportunities as they present themselves. 8, all events are neutral until we label them. And you know, we're all brought up, and I think all cultures this way, we're all brought up in this very binary culture where everything has a label. It's either right or wrong, or it's black or it's white, or it's yes or it's no. And you know, all events are really neutral until we assign a label to them. And that's not to say that some events don't need labels, because some do, of course. Some behaviors, rightly so, should be labeled. But generally, really most events are kind of neutral until we really sort out what they mean. And racing to saying that's bad, okay? Obviously there are things that are obviously bad. But generally though, there's not a lot of those. And by racing into saying that's bad, all of a sudden now we got judgment and we've lost our neutrality and we're not observing anymore. And then we start to contextually lose the ability to analyze and understand the circumstances that we find ourselves in. 9, when we label events, we automatically narrow our vision. So if we automatically say, oh, gee whiz, that's awful, okay? Or I possibly can't see how this can work. Right? Once we provide those labels, right? Once we put those labels on an event, on a change event, then we automatically narrow our field. And we were talking about the first day about being curious, and you know, curiosity leads to an open mind. Open mind leads to greater possibilities. And once we start labeling things, it narrows right up. And then 10, being an observation, you get to rewrite your script, which is kind of cool. You know, things don't always have to be the way they've been. As a matter of fact, it's probably one of the biggest lies that we either tell ourselves or we've been told, right? Nothing has to be, just because it was that way before, doesn't mean it has to be that way going forward. And so, you know, just because we've always done it that way, just because, well, things have always happened to me that way, right? The victim thing. Well, all of that, okay? All of that is just scripting. And so by observing, you're able to make your course adjustments and to rewrite your script, right, on the fly while you're moving, okay? And that's a huge benefit, because none of us are hostages to our programming, and none of us are hostages to our known pasts, okay? It's unlikely, okay, that something that happened in your past will repeat itself exactly twice. Very unlikely. You might have similarities, you might have similar circumstances, in which case you're going to want to be thinking about it. Well, okay, wait a minute, this feels familiar to me. Like I've had this before, maybe slightly different circumstances. What does this mean? So if you have reoccurring events tell you, oh, it's time to rewrite your script. So that's why I think being an observation, this is one of my favorite topics, because it's a real discipline to be able to do it. That understanding, and again, it's a little, I don't know if you want to call it metaphysical or a little quantum, to understand that you know, although there's just me here, right, there's 2 of me, and we're working through the day. And if I allow my observer me to communicate, right, with my earth me, then I get all sorts of feedback and I get all sorts of information. It's that director-actor relationship where the director is only an observation because he's not acting. And then he's only passing information down to the actor who's actually going to be in the movie on the ground floor, seeing and then, you know, interacting with the other movie casts, right? So everybody around you, if you think about it this way, right? That's why they say cast of characters. all these expressions that we're used to, they all come from someplace. And that, the world around us, the people that we surround ourselves with, our cast members and the places we go and all that are our sets. And if you kind of think about it that way, it's pretty easy to put it into perspective. So I hope that's helpful. I hope you use that. I always found that to be a metaphor that people can understand. So. Getting down to the end here. So experiences do not define you. You're not defined by your experiences. And it's important, I think, to understand that, we're spiritual beings having life experiences here. So we're here to learn, right? We're here to have life experiences. It's what we're supposed to have. We're supposed to be rich in our experiences, and we're supposed to allow ourselves to be rich in our experiences. And nothing that's either happened to us or nothing that we've done in the past truly defines us going forward, because we can always change it. We can always rewrite the script. We always have the power of observation. Everybody has the power of observation. And that's how we end up moving ourselves from either where we are today to someplace better, or maybe someplace we don't like as much to someplace that we would like to be. So it's that power of observation. You're all we're spiritual beings here having experience so you can learn. And that's that director and actor relationship. So in practice, why don't we just take a couple of minutes and everybody can write this down, and I'll just check the chats real quick. But how do you think being an observer would have served you better in a recent experience? And what would you have changed in how you would have handled it? So why don't you just take a minute and write those down, your thoughts on that. Okay, yeah, one of the comments was that it was so apt for now because gives us the distance and the grounding around what we're going through. And I think that's such a great observation. And so thank you for that. Yeah, this is a time to be in observation. I know that this is a time where we've got some fear, some anxiety, some apprehension. All those things. The last pandemic was 102 years ago, 1918. So none of us really have any experience with that. And so being an observer, and I know for me, my observation skills are running hot right now. I mean, my time, and I'm almost 100% of the time in observation now, because you're watching what do people need, what do you guys need, right? What do our clients need, reacting to, kind of watching how the general population is handling this, and all those types of things. This is a time of like no other time, of course, but this is also a time like no other to be really curious, and that curiosity will lead you into observation, because this will be. I was telling the kids at dinner the other night that remember this time. I was telling my grandson, Parker, he's 9, remember this time. Because you will be able to tell, again, I'm talking to my grandson, you will be telling your grandchildren that you lived through the pandemic. That's going to be a super big deal. So this, the whole grounding, and this is a really good time to give yourself the breathing room to be able to digest what's going on around you. And again, being an observation does that. So I hope today was helpful. Tomorrow is going to be super fun. We're going to be getting into self-limiting beliefs. And then action items you can take, okay, that fold in all 4 days and everything that we've learned in the 4 days, and then at the beginning of tomorrow, which is self-limiting beliefs. And then we have kind of an action list that we'll go through, which will really be a lot of fun. So it's been great to be with you guys. I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you find it helpful. And I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Take care.